All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Reds. Ben, how are you, brother?
Dude, I'm doing good. I watched the Olympics. I watched a little bit. I've been kind of keeping up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got home from work and I turned it on because I wanted to see what was on. And it was table tennis. And it was Sweden against Japan. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sweden goes down 2-0. It's 3 matches and that's it. And this was to advance to the gold medal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you win 3 of them, you're onto the gold. So 2 matches, and rather I say matches. So it's a set. You win a set. So 3 sets and you win. And a set is full of 3 games. So it's a best of 3. Anyway, so Sweden's down 2-0. The next guy comes up. He wins. He beats Japan. And then that's, Japan 2, Sweden 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next guy for Sweden comes up and beats the next guy from Japan and makes it 2-2. And then the next guy from Sweden comes up and beats the next guy from Japan, and Sweden advanced to gold. It was one of the craziest comebacks I've ever seen in honestly many sports. It reminded me of the 3-1 lead that was blown in the finals. It was crazy, but it was cool. It was fun.
That's cool. I've been checking in every now and again. I've been being a former cross country track athlete, I've been keeping an eye on the track events, and I watched crazy finishes with the 100-meter with Noah Lyles. That was crazy. And the 400, the USA guy totally just had a comeback today, which was super cool. And the 1500, the USA won. They won when the guy got a last push at the end, and they got first and third for the first time in 112 years. I was like, this USA's cooking right now, dude.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really cool. The comebacks were pretty sick.
Yeah, it's been super intense this year, this time around, and I really like it. So it's been fun for sure. So last week we did our AFC predictions, and we went through division by division, and just made our brackets and who we thought were gonna advance. So we're gonna do the same thing now this week with the NFC. So we're gonna start going division by division. We're gonna start with I wouldn't say least interesting, but probably the least competitive of the bunch. That's gonna be the NFC South. So we're just like last time, we're going to do the DraftKings betting odds to see, where Vegas has these teams slated to start the season. So we got the Atlanta Falcons at -120, and then we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at +320, New Orleans Saints close behind at +340, and then the Carolina Panthers at +1100. So let's start with you, Ben. Who did you have winning your division, winning this division?
NFC South is going to belong to the Falcons, and I'm pretty confident in them. Who do you have?
I struggled with this. I've been debating all day how I wanted to do it, and I'm going to do the Falcons as well. Yeah. It was really close between them and the Bucs, and I'll explain it a bit, but you can go.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of like their team. They added Kirk Cousins, and look, that contract that they gave Kirk was massive, and it was awesome, right? Signed him for a whole bunch of years. And then they went and drafted Michael Penix. Yeah. And it was what's the direction here? So they fired Arthur Smith and hired a new head coach. They got Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, who are all viable options for Kirk down the field. But the Penix pick, it really, it doesn't really make sense to me. It's kind of bugging me. But signing Kirk to that deal and having Penix ride the bench and kind of learn from a vet in Kirk is pretty cool, even though Penix is still an older rookie. But I feel like their O-line is awesome. I think that Kirk's going to have time in the pocket, and he's going to have clean pockets, which he benefits from. It's shown it over history. I think they'll move the ball really well, and I think that Bijan's honestly going to have a really great year. I think that he could go for 1,000+ all purpose. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a pretty big year for them.
Yeah, no, I like everything you said. I agree with. I think they have great skill position players, and Arthur Smith, and I said it was a good little pickup for the Steelers because he runs a system that works pretty well for them. But for this Falcons team, he wasn't using the weapons correctly. And obviously, their head coach Raheem Morris comes from the Sean McVay tree. He was the former, I want to say DC down there in the Rams.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be able to use the weapons that they have here a lot better. So, no, and I was debating because this division is going to be close, but for the wrong reasons, because they're all kind of bad and all kind of towards each other. Like, again, Kirk Cousins is going to make this team better, but they were 7-10 last year, and I just don't anticipate them being better than 9-8. But I think 9-8, just like last year, will win this division. I think that record has won this division for like 4 straight years. So, but yeah.
Yeah, it 100% has. I have the Falcons at 10-7, so we're close on records there.
Yeah.
It really does boil down to Kirk's health too. Like he's coming off a major injury, and he's in a new situation where he's gonna be the guy. You know what I mean? Like he's everything offensively, at least in terms of pushing the ball and actually putting points on the board. It's gonna come down to Kirk and how well he can really facilitate that offense. So it's going to be interesting to see. The Falcons are going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
No, for sure. So, who are your 2, 3, and 4? In what order?
So 2 was the Bucks for me. I had them at 7-10.
Okay.
And then I had the Saints, and then the Panthers.
Okay, same. That was my order too. I did 8 and 9 for the Bucks, and I almost put them at 7-10 too. But I think they're gonna. I think we forget that the Bucks have actually won this division for the past 3 years. So it's
Mm-hmm.
You always count them out, and then they just somehow end up sneaking out. And and they kept a lot of good pieces. Obviously, some pieces have left, but they've signed a lot of their young players like Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tristan Wirfs. They just signed the largest O-lineman contract, well deserved. So they have good pieces, and obviously Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, like they still have those pieces, and they have a descendant from the Kyle Shanahan offensive tree or the Sean McVay tree running the offense now, because it was Dave Canales, who is now the head coach of the Panthers. So yeah, there's a little adjustment there, but Baker has already kind of played in that offense when he was in LA for those few weeks. So
yeah, and they just gave Baker a big 3-year contract, so they're showing that they have the faith in Baker, at least to push him through this I guess regrowth era, because it's one of those situations where they don't have a ton to build around. They have really nice pieces in certain spots, but the direction is it kind of wavers at times with them. But they're going to be competitive this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they give the Falcons a run for their money on the division.
same.
Just because they were, like you said, they won the division the last 3 years, and they've been competitive, and they've found ways to stay competitive. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting season for them for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about real quick the bottom feeders. So New Orleans, I had it 6-11, and I don't know. I don't think that's unfair. I think New Orleans has consistently just slowly trended downward, just like slightly worse records every year, but they're still competitive. They still always have a good defense, but then they're kicking the same door with Derek Carr, and I don't really know what they're doing. They have what's his name? Alvin Kamara is having issues. I don't know what's really going on there. And I never have a good feeling. I haven't had a good feeling about the Saints team since Breeze was gone. So, I mean, I don't know how you feel about him.
No, so that right there, all right, since Breeze was gone, that was the time when they needed to really start rebuilding. And they haven't done that since. They've been kicking the rebuilding can down the road ever since. Like they're just completely avoiding and like kind of turning the other cheek to a rebuild phase. And it's frustrating. Like for me, I have them going 4-13 this year just because I'm mad at them. I don't think they're actually going to do that bad, but there's ways that they could do that. I'm looking at their schedule and I see like there's potential they could have some really bad games that really throw their rhythm off this season. But like they have no clear direction. They're constantly in trial mode with QBs, and like Derek Carr right now, I don't think he's going to get it done. I don't think he's that kind of guy. I mean, he needs to have really, really good pieces around him to feel comfortable. And that's when he starts to, like, when he's comfortable is when he starts actually slinging it. When he's not comfortable, this dude is a check down merchant. And even
Yeah.
that at times is like, I don't know if that's, sustainable for an entire season because that's really readable. So, yeah, I don't like the Saints.
And that's fair. And obviously, when it comes down to the Derek Carr of it all, and it wasn't just Derek Carr, it was Jameis Winston. They thought they could revive his career, and it nothing ever really panned out for them. I think, sometimes when you're in that position, you kind of should just accept the rebuild, and then you maybe luck out and get a quarterback, or you could end up being like the Carolina Panthers and fumbling and hoping that Bryce Young. Their only hope is that Dave Canales can get the most out of Bryce Young this year. They're going to be another bottom feeder team, but fortunately they were able to, and obviously they lost their pick to the Chicago Bears for the number 1 seed, or for the number 1 overall pick, but they ended up drafting that Xavier Legette guy from South Carolina. So they're trying to bolster that receiver room for him. They're trying to improve the offensive line. They're trying to get him more weapons. So hopefully it pans out. So, but I think Carolina's still a couple years away from being legitimately competitive.
I agree. They are going to be a team to watch this year, though. Like, they're not going to be good, but just watching their development is going to be something to keep an eye on. You kind of spoke to it, bring in Dave Canales. He, for those who don't know, he was key in the developments of QBs like Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. And so this is a smart move for the Panthers. I think if you really want Bryce Young to take another leap, or take that first leap out of the gate, I think that's going to be a smart move for them, and I think it'll pay off. The O-line was garbage last year, no clear direction. I think this year is going to be a little bit different. The defense will be good. I don't think the defense will really cost them any games. It's really going to boil down to just consistency and what they can get out of Bryce.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, Dave is going to be really good at potentially getting the most out of him, and that's the problem. Like, Bryce is in a position where he just didn't show the ability to be an NFL quarterback. And part of that was who we had around him. And there was a lot of toxicity just in general. David Tepper's a horrible owner who is beefing with the fans and throwing beer on them and stuff like that. It's a very immature environment over there. So I think having a guy like Dave, I think he's a good young coach. He's going to be able to get the attention of the locker room. And I think, at least for Bryce's development, he at least has 2 years to really get the most out of him before they have to figure out, do we pay him or not? Is he really, worthy of the number 1 pick? So, yeah, so I guess we'll see with that.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's move on to probably the most fun division to talk about here in the NFC, because all these teams, almost all of them, are going to be frisky. So let's move on to the NFC North, and we're going to talk about their betting odds first. So right now, we got the Detroit Lions as the favorite at plus 135, the Green Bay Packers at plus 225, the Chicago Bears at plus 275, and the Minnesota Vikings at plus 1,000. So I'll take this one. Let me make sure I have my thing. So this one was tough because I had to decide. I was like, both all 3 of these teams, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Packers, all have a legitimate argument to say, hey, we might be the surprise team this year. I picked the Packers winning this division at 11-6.
Wow.
I picked them at 11-6, and I'll let you. I'm assuming you had a different winner before I give you mine.
Yeah, I have the Lions, but please continue.
Yeah, so the Lions. So in this division, I had them both at 11-6, but I had Green Bay winning the tiebreaker. But I did have the Lions making the playoffs still. I think so. For my argument for Green Bay is that they're one of the few teams this offseason that legitimately got better. And obviously they committed to Jordan Love long term. I don't think that's a bad decision. I think that was the right decision by them. He showed to be capable in a Matt LaFleur style offense. It took them a while, but Matt LaFleur also comes from that Kyle Shanahan tree. It takes a second to learn that offense, but once you kind of nail it down, and it's not just a quarterback, it's the receivers. There was miscommunications throughout the first half of the season, and then in the second half of the season, the receivers really picked it up. So now they're in the situation where they have a bunch of young talent on that offensive side of the ball. You add Josh Jacobs instead of Aaron Jones, a good replacement, and then you bolster the back half of that defense, which was a huge problem for them last year. And actually just the defense in general was a huge problem, but they changed defensive coordinator, so hopefully they can update and upgrade there. So I buy that they're going to be a legitimately solid team. And I think they're going to be in position scheduling wise where they're going to face teams that are going to struggle going to Lambeau to finish the season. So I like them a lot. But I definitely Detroit, I'm not sleeping on. I think 11-6 is a fair record for Detroit because Detroit kind of, I'm not going to say snuck up on everybody, but they benefited a lot last year from the Ben Johnson system, and they're going to benefit from having him instead of losing him to the coaching carousel. Like, that's huge. Like, I agree that's a huge plus, and they bolstered their cornerback room with Terry and Arnold, and I forget the Kennesaw Rakistra. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, but they bolstered their first two picks were cornerbacks, just like the Eagles, to kind of address a weakness. But their offense is basically exactly the same. And Amon-Ra's he got paid. Will they be able to step up? I think they're going to be consistently good, but I think they're not going to. I just don't see them having a better record than they did last year. Did they have what was the record last year? I'm trying to.
They went 12-5 last year.
So yeah, okay, yeah. So I was debating that, but I also think that in this division, I think the Packers are going to have the edge this time.
So for me, I have the Lions winning the division. Like I said, I have them going 13-4.
Okay,
and
that's totally fair.
Yeah, and a lot of that, like, I'm looking at the damage that they did last year. Yeah, they crept up on a lot of people, but they fell short in the NFC Championship game to the Niners, in a game that they should have won. They won the division 12-5 outright. They were the best in the division by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
This offseason they extended Amon-Ra, which is a major W. And they, like, their coaching room, I feel like, is finally like dialed in. Like,
for sure,
they've actually got a full direction that they can move in, and everybody's rallying around it. And to have us going into the second year of that style now, I think is only going to benefit them. I think they're only going to get more consistent and improve. So Goff is finally home and he's comfortable, and that's dangerous. When Jared Goff is comfortable and slinging that ball, he's easily one of the best quarterbacks in at least the conference. Mm-hmm. There's an argument that he's top 10 in the league. I think the floor for them, honestly, is how they ended last year. I don't see them going under 12-5, and maybe it's audacious of me, but yeah, 13-4 is really where I see that team. And I had the Packers in second with 10-7.
Okay,
and I really love Jordan Love, and I think that signing for as much as he did, but signing him as long as they did was key to their success going forward. I think he's the quarterback you got to build around. He's been the best thing, obviously, since Aaron Rodgers, and that hasn't been a very long, stretch or anything. It was immediate, but like, to be able to roll into a guy like that in Jordan Love, and who has sat back and learned the ropes, and then he kind of snuck up on everybody too. Like, nobody really expected him to do what he's doing because he's been riding the bench. Mm-hmm. But then he steps up and starts making these plays, and it all came in the second half of last year. And that's kind of what you said. Like, everybody started really learning that offense in the second half, and that second half was dangerous. They were one of the best teams. They were, like, scary. I didn't want to play against them. Like, I was terrified, and they wiped the floor with the Cowboys in the first round. So, like, this team has a lot of really good things going for them. The key to their success is going to be consistency in the system and consistency in the QB play of Jordan Love. And that's going to be something. He's still young, and he's still a young starter. And that's something, like, he hasn't seen every team. He hasn't seen every system. He hasn't even seen, like, every defense thrown at him yet. Like, he's got a lot to learn still. And I think this is going to be a good year for them. I think that they'll go 10-7, and honestly, they'll probably give the Lions a run for the money through a vast majority of the season. But ultimately, I think the Lions have just got it a little more dialed in right now.
That's fair. I think for me, I'm banking more on potential, because I think if Jordan Love reaches even just a little bit more growth this year, building off of what he did the second half of last season, I mean, the ceiling could be even higher for this team. And I think, and again, they made a ton of additions and made changes in the offseason in a way that I was like, okay, they really went all in to try and improve this team quick before the money aspect really, becomes an issue with Jordan Love's contract, because it doesn't bother them just yet. I think they're 2 years away from really having to figure out the financials of it. So this is their chance, and I think they did a good job bolstering this team. And again, I like the Lions too. I think the consistency, very much like the 22 Eagles, of keeping all their coordinators and keeping everyone in the same place with Dan Campbell motivating this team, that's going to be a huge boon. That's going to only make them better. But I do think there is a limit to Jared Goff's ability and ceiling. And I think, yes, he got him all the way to the conference championship game, but he hasn't finished the job, and that's something that's going to continue to haunt him until he does. And I also think that his limitations are part of the reason this team won't be able to go as far as they can. And they married Jared Goff now. He is now, they signed him long-term too. So they're committing to this, and they're hoping that, staying with Ben Johnson will continue this offensive rise, and hopefully their defense improves. And then if their defense improves, they're going to be a 13-14. They're already hard enough to stop, but their defense held them back last year. And that's the same thing with the Packers. If both of these defenses step up, both of these teams are going to be Super Bowl threats, even more so than what people already think they are now.
And there is an argument that the Packers have the better defense right now. So that's an interesting point. I see where you're coming from. So yeah. So those are our 1s and 2s. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure I know that the Bears are your 3rd, right?
Yeah, correct.
How you feel about them?
I feel good. I like this team. This is going to be a frisky team. They're probably, due to the whole, Caleb Williams hype, and now they're on, Hard Knocks. They're doing that whole thing, and that's just only going to bring more and more hype, because they get to see the person that Caleb Williams is. And whenever you get a look inside the person and the team, it's always you feel like you can relate more to them. So I think Caleb's going to come in. He was already super popular, but he's going to come into this as a fan favorite, and I think people want him to succeed outside of the division, of course. But I also think that there's going to be growing pains with him. I think they did a really good job setting him up as best as possible for a rookie quarterback. He's walking into one of the best situations out there. You trade for Keenan Allen, you just signed DJ Moore to a max contract, you added DeAndre Swift, you try to improve Rome Odunze, that's right, through the draft, and then you bolster your offensive line a little bit. It's still a work in progress, but you still have Cole Kmet, who emerged last year as a legit target, and that defense, once they traded for Montez Sweat, was a top 10 defense. So there's a legitimate chance that defense will continue to build, and you have Montez, you have Jalen Johnson, you have pieces there that can, this team's going to be frisky. But I also think that expectations are going to be a little high. I think people have them as a sneaky Super Bowl pick, and I completely understand. But maybe just pump the brakes a tiny bit. But I have them going 8-9. I think they're going to be up and down. And then next year is when we can really have that conversation of just how far this team can go, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I actually had them at 10-7, which is the same record as the Packers, just losing a tiebreaker there. But dude, I look at this Bears team and I actually really like them. I like how they're built. Specifically looking, honestly, on the other side, on the defensive side, there's no major star players on that side, but there's just a bunch of dogs, a bunch of dudes who are just ready to make a play. And that kind of thing is super exciting and fun to watch. And they're really well put together on that side of it. As far as the offense, you spoke to a lot of it. The thing I'm most concerned with is that O-line. It's not great still. And so for a first-year quarterback who's trying to learn the ropes, he's going to be running for his life in a lot of these games. And, that kind of a situation, you can lead to a lot of turnovers, can lead to a lot of, mishaps. It's going to be interesting to see how Caleb really handles those situations. And, once we get some tape on Caleb, we'll kind of know how this team is going to look in the second half of the year. But it's really up in the air right now. We've just seen the training camp stuff, and obviously what we've seen before that. But they've got some really nice building blocks, and it seems like, again, the Bears are trending in the right direction. So hopefully this time they just stay going, trending up.
Yeah, and 10-7 isn't. I think that could be. I want to say that could be their best, because if we think about it this way, given everything they went through last year, they were still 7-10. That still wasn't a bad record given what they went through. And so you insert Caleb Williams for Justin Fields, and a 3-game bump isn't that is expectation wise, that isn't that big of a jump. That's normally what you would see if, like, for example, for Carolina, they were what 2-15 last year. A 3-win gap, puts you at 5-12, but people would still feel good about a 3-win improvement. So that's just, to put things in perspective. I think Chicago can make a lot of noise if everything goes their way and Caleb does look as advertised. So
yeah, definitely. So obviously, Mini is our last. I have them going 5-12. They finished last year nice 7-10. They moved off Kirk. They brought in Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. Sam probably starts for at least half the year, and then they'll probably hand it over to JJ. They brought in some good defensive players and Dallas Turner, who's a stud. They got a little bit better in that regard, but I think that they're just going to face a lot of growth problems this year, and they're in a rebuilding phase. So it's going to be a rebuilding year.
Yeah, and the good news for them is they signed Jettas. Justin Jefferson signed them max contract that made him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league at about $35 million a year. So good for him. He got his money and he stayed loyal to Minnesota. That's also really cool. So, he gets to help JJ McCarthy's growth. I mean, that's the best target you could possibly have for for a young quarterback. Yeah. And I think they've been really adamant. I think they're aware. They're one of these teams that are accepting the rebuild. They're aware that there's a ways to go. Like they're going to be competitive. Brian Flores on the defensive end calling plays. He's going to make them frisky. He's going to make them kind of hard to deal with. But offensively, they're still going to have a ways to go. And Sam Darnold's a good piece, and he'll win them games, but he'll probably lose them a couple games too. And then when it gets late in the season, like you said, they'll probably put in JJ. And I think that's the right thing. I think they're not in a position to compete right now for a title, so there's no need to rush the quarterback process of it all. I think they're in a good spot, and Sam's a good bridge quarterback for that.
Yeah, and you've got JJ for a number of years now too, so you can throw away a year.
Yeah, exactly. And he's one of the younger players in this draft, so for him I think he ended up in a great situation because Kevin O'Connell's an awesome coach, so I think he's going to be able to put him in a position to succeed.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so now let's move on to the first of our two divisions. So we will go to the NFC East, and we will talk about the DraftKings odds here. So we got the Philadelphia Eagles being the favorite at -110. We got the Dallas Cowboys coming in at +155. The Commanders at +800, and then the New York Giants at +1800. So, the formerly known NFC Beast is no more. And I don't know what to really make of this division, but since it's my division, I'll obviously glaze my Eagles here, and I have them winning the division. And it's more than just it's more than just the Eagles bias of it all. The NFC East curse still lives on. There hasn't been a back-to-back winner in 20 plus years.
A crazy amount of years.
Right. So it's been 20 plus years, and the Eagles were on their way to breaking that last year, and it didn't happen. So, but I have them bouncing back this year in a major way, and I have them at 14-3. And I know when we talked about the schedule, when the schedule released, I was like, man, I could really see, this team running into some issues and them being 12-5. And then all this training camp stuff comes out. And I'm not looking at like plays in particular. I'm thinking about like the vibes, and not to mention the pieces that we did bring in and the issues that were glaring. We went ahead and said, everyone who was like, was it Nick Sirianni? Was it Jalen? Like, what are the issues here? One of the main issues was the play calling and who was responsible for the play calling. And our defense was horrendous going through defensive coordinator changes and, firing / keeping our coordinator, but then using Matt Patricia. It was just a nightmare. So how do we do that? We get two adults in the room with Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. Nick Sirianni can go back to his strengths and not have to feel like he has to control more of this team. He gets to focus on the things that makes Nick Sirianni great, and that's the attention to detail, situational football, making sure that this team is prepared for every single moment. And there's been a lot of great news out of camp. Jalen Hurts still hasn't thrown an interception the entire camp, which is great. And this team looks better than ever. And they're installing motion. They're switching up the defense. And instead of, the cornerback room sucking, we added Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, CJ Gardner-Johnson's back in the building. We added Isaiah Rodgers last year, and he's looking like one of our better outside corners too. All of a sudden, we have depth at our biggest position of weakness. We add Devin White to the linebacking room, and a lot of reports are saying Jalen Carter is looking like that freaking dude. So I'm really excited to see how he does in year 2. Obviously, the offensive line, when you lose Kelsey, that is a question. And there have been reports in camps that, they're still trying to figure out this right guard spot. And, that's good. There's going to be some growing pains there. But I also think that given the rest of the starting line we have and the weapons that we have, this team is going to be exceptionally hard to stop this year. And the schedule is favorable, much more favorable. And not to mention the Eagles, and I'm going to bring this up later when we talk about the Niners. But the Eagles do have, in terms of rest advantage, that was one of the biggest issues we dealt with last year, right? When we went into the gauntlet, I had complained, pre-excuses, that the rest disadvantages were terrible. Especially when we went to the Chiefs, Bills, Niners, Cowboys, there was rest disadvantages all over the place there. And it just broke this team down. And this year, we are fourth best for how much rest we have versus our opponents this year. We have 12 extra days of rest compared to the rest of our opponents. So I think that the Eagles are going to be in a better spot to come out on top of this division, given the way the rest of the division kind of, had their off seasons, especially the Cowboys, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the Eagles are going to win this division, and I don't think it's going to be close. So that's my Eagles. I'm excited for that. But who do you have winning the division?
So I have the Commanders winning. No, I'm just kidding. It's the Eagles. And a lot of that is honestly to do with faith in that historical no repeat in 20 plus years. And honestly, looking at what the Eagles did this offseason, you addressed every single bit of it. But it was a W offseason in more ways than it was an L. Like, the biggest loss was obviously losing Kelsey. And then I think that it's honestly a loss losing Hassan Reddick. But I think that in terms of replacing him, you haven't done that, but you've given yourself more of a cushion, especially in like the secondary. And now the linebacker room is a little bit better. So like, I think that this team's going to be good. And I think like the collapse last year, honestly, I think it was pretty fluky. I think that it had a lot to do with that rest advantage stuff. And then just ultimately, like, there was a disconnect once the losses piled. It was a couple losses. And then all of a sudden the coaching room was getting a little weird. And then obviously there was that switch up towards the half, like the 3/4 point. And it was just kind of messy to end the season. It was fluky. It didn't represent what Philadelphia football is. And so I think that they're going to rally really well this year. I have them going 13-4.
I appreciate that.
And yeah, I mean, there's not many weaknesses when I look at this team like there were last year. So it's going to be up to just teams to play ultimately better than them if they want to eke out wins.
Yeah, and I think despite the talent that is in that building and on that field, I do think there is a level of the Eagles getting slightly underrated compared to some of these other teams. People would probably say the Packers are better. People would say the Lions are better. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's test that theory, because I don't think that's going to be the case this year. But that's also a good thing, because last year was like and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I think it's that pressure of, oh, you were one play away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, you're next. Like, this is your time. This team looks legit. They can handle any change because of the talent they have in the room. That just didn't happen. It shows that there's so many pieces that go into a successful NFL season. And health was not on our side last year. And just the coaching nonsense was not on our side. And that's why we went and got who we got. And I think if that doesn't address the issue, then we look from the top down. Is it Nick? Is it Jalen? Is that relationship really the reason why this team is struggling? But they did everything to plug those holes from outside of that question with Jalen and Nick, and they're doing their best to address that throughout all of training camp, trying to repair that relationship that was probably a little disjointed and a little fractured because of who they are. They're two different individuals. I get that. But I think that they're in a good spot now. And I think the focus is back with this team. And I think that's going to make them scarier than ever, because last year it was like there was reports that they're just spending a lot of their time in the locker room thinking, damn, we almost won the Super Bowl during the season when you're going 10-1. So it's one of those things that it's like, that still weighs on you. And now they can kind of go with slightly less pressure, but they still have the expectations. They're still a Super Bowl contender, so we'll see.
I do wonder with the reports of Jalen throwing, almost 180 or whatever without a pick in training camp. I wonder, is he really putting the ball in harm's way? Is he taking shots, or is he is his camp going well other than him not throwing interceptions? Is what I'm curious on.
Mm-hmm. He's looked awesome. Like last year, he threw a total of like 17 touchdowns, and then he had 17 touchdown passes in the first 5 days of practice. Like he's been the leader, and I will admit that, like, yeah, he hasn't had an interception, but there's been a few, I would say 3 or 4 dropped interceptions. Like he's put Keely Ringo almost had one in his hand, Bryce Huff almost had one in his hands. Like they're just, they dropped a little bit, but he's throwing like 160 some consecutive passes without an interception. And I guess go to one of the Eagles beat writers, Elliot Shore Parks, he apparently tracks all of it because he's a psycho, but that broke Carson Wentz's record in 2017 when he had like 158. So Jalen's looked great, and he looks, he's healthier again. He's not running on one knee. He looks faster, and he looks like he's in control of the offense. There was one thing that I noticed, that was pointed out, was when they had their practice at the link and they were doing they had all the fans there and whatever, they were running 11 on 11. There was multiple instances of Jalen doing the checkdowns, doing the audibles, like, how people were worried, oh, how is he going to do that without Kelsey? And he looked extremely comfortable doing so. And when he made those checks, they were plays that were successful. So it looks like Jalen is much more aware and ready to take that step of being the one that's responsible to take that role. So this has been a huge camp for him. He's looked the part. They're like, all these Eagles beat writers are like, if he looks like this in the season, like, we might have to start talking about MVP Jalen again. So he's kind of returned to form in terms of the level of confidence he has, and maybe this system's just gonna help him press some more easy buttons that he just didn't have last year. So we'll see. And people are like, he's afraid to throw over the middle. He's consistently throwing over the middle in camp. Like he's looking for different people outside of just AJ on a slant or Devontae. So, and our 6'6" wide receiver Johnny Wilson's been making a ton of noise, and we got him in the late rounds, and he's been doing a good job. So there's been a lot of good reports, but I will admit we have been having some ticky-tack injuries, and guys have been going down, and that's a little nerve-wracking, but guys are going to be ready for the season. I think we'll be okay. So
I do wonder then, hearing all that about Hurts, your defense must be trash. That's all I'm hearing.
No, honestly, there's been, I am worried a little bit about the offensive line, because Jalen Carter is consistently just destroying our offensive line, and Jordan Davis has been doing a good job too. And I also think that, like, our defense, I don't think our defense is bad, and I think that, again, the weaknesses that we had have improved. But gosh, like, we were the worst defense in the NFL during that collapse, and as long as we're just freaking league average, we're going to be just fine. Yeah. This offense, I think, will get back to form to being able to beat you in a shootout. So that's what I'm excited for sure.
I like it. So, obviously, I had the Eagles 13-4. You had them 14-3.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Cowboys being second again, and I have them going 12-5. They won the division, and lost in the first round. Shocker to the Packers. Here's the thing with the Cowboys, okay? Cowboys will always be the Cowboys. They will be an awesome regular season team.
Mm-hmm.
But the second that round one hits, until they can break down that wall, it's like the Niners in the Super Bowl. If you can't break down round one wall, you will never be anything more than just a good regular season team. And the problem, I think the biggest problem with them, I'm going to pin it on Dak. I don't like Dak. I think that he's a pretty average quarterback, that his stats are really inflated. I think the defense keeps them in a lot more games than they get credit for, because I think that, their offense, look, up and down, stars everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that blanking on his name, the head coach,
Mike
McCarthy uses that team, he's terrible. I think that Mike needs to go. I think that Dak needs to go. And then they're going to have like an actual contender. Like, at least until Mike's out of the building, I don't think they're ever going to be a contender.
Well, okay. So I love this. I'm going to unpack this a little bit because I'm excited. I agree okay, so let's talk about the Cowboys. I have them going second, like you said, but I don't have 12-5. I have 11-6. And I debated putting them 10-7. I think they're going to get an extra win because of the new kickoff rules. They have the best returner in the league in Cavante Turpin, so I think he's gonna make some noise doing that. But if there's one thing that like they're at, like the nonsense that is the Dallas Cowboys is Jerry Jones saying, "Hey, we're all in, but we're not going to pay our quarterback, we're not going to pay our receiver, and we have to pay Micah next year." Those are the big three, right? Those are the three that they have to talk about. And they can't pay CD without paying someone else, paying Dak or something. And I do agree with you that, number one, Mike McCarthy's going to be gone after this season, unless they make a conference title, and win the title. I don't think, if they win the conference title, then they'll probably keep him. Same with Dak. If they get to the conference title, Dak probably stays and they pay him. And they should have paid CD by now. I don't know what the heck they're doing. If he wants the number under Justin, just freaking pay him, dude. You're gonna treat him. You've treated him like the number one wideout. He's getting targeted like 150 times. Like, you might as well just pay the dude the money that he's gonna continuously. His Dak's favorite target. I don't understand what you're doing. So they're ruining that relationship too. And then you have to pay Micah, who's gonna probably want the Nick Bosa contract or something a little bit more than that, or maybe even the Jefferson contract, and he's worthy of that too. So they have pieces, but they also lost like key figures on the offensive line, and then relying on Tyler Guyton and I forget who they replaced Biotish with, but they lost guy and Tyron Smith. Like, they lost guys who were extremely important to this team. And they brought back the corpse of Ezekiel Elliott, and they think that that's gonna replace Tony Pollard. Like, I don't think they got better at all. Actually, I think they got worse in this offseason. And like you said, they're always going to be a good regular season team. They dust teams at home. Like, they're going to be fine. Like, but given against the rest of the NFC, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about them. And they're definitely not going to win the division. The curse will live on. They're definitely not going to win. But man, oh man, they're like, the vibes are horrible there. Like, from the outside perspective, they can lie all they want. And like, even Zeke was at the training camp, and there was a thing they asked him, they're like, "Oh, what's it like to be back?" He's like, "Oh, it's great to be back." He's just like, I'm surprised. Like, I thought there'd be more fans here. Like, I'm used to there's a lot less people out here now. Because I think the fans have also given up on this team and see right through the BS that is the Dallas Cowboys. And Jerry Jones saying we're all in, but not doing anything to address this team at all. So that's just screw the Cowboys. Dallas sucks. They're gonna be a fine regular season team, and they'll make some noise, but then they're gonna ultimately choke like normal. So,
well, and all their losses last year came on the road, like, and they have some tough road games this year. So I think that like a record similar to what you have is probably more along the lines. I just wanted to emphasize like how good they are in the regular season versus how terrible they are when the first round of the playoffs start.
Right. And they're going to run into their daddy, the Niners, and it's going to be another humiliating loss, and that'll probably cripple them, and it's going to be great. And we got to
get there first.
Yeah. When is that matchup? I know it's later in the year. Yeah. It's a little later in the year.
It's
I'm pretty sure.
Oh man, I want to say it's like week 11 or 12.
Yeah. That's going to be like the breaking point for that team. They're not going to recover from that.
It's just what happened to the Eagles. We broke the Eagles last year. We have a chance to break the NFC East once again. Like,
yeah, dude.
We'll see if it happens.
Yeah. So, speaking of the NFC East, let's continue to the finish. We'll finish off with the two bottom feeders. So I have the Commanders in third, and then the Giants in fourth. How about you?
Yeah, I have the Commanders in third and the Giants in fourth, and I have the Commanders with just one more win than them. I have them having 6 wins.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the Commanders. Honestly, they have some good things going. What's your record?
Based off the exercise, I actually had the Giants in third, but I don't believe that, so I'm going to switch them. I had them at 5-12. I didn't even realize I did that. So no, Commanders are third at 5-12. That's what I have. Sorry,
that's amazing. Keep going. Commanders ended last year 4-13. They were terrible. but they overhauled their entire roster this
Mm-hmm.
offseason. They hired Dan Quinn to be a head coach. Meh.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
He'll help at least reset the culture, which is kind of what they're going for. Obviously, they added rookie Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota as a backup, which I really like that move. I think that he's a solid backup. I know he's had a weird career, but having a vet behind Jaden like that, I think is really going to help him.
Yeah.
I think Jaden's going to be good from the start, but I think he's going to kind of get figured out pretty quick. And there's a lot of limitations to this team. And I think that that's going to hinder them down the stretch of this season. I think that it's just going to be a growth year. They're going to move the ball really well. They still have Scary Terry. They drafted Luke McCaffrey and have Austin Eckler. They have new pass rushers on the defensive end. The linebacking core is actually awesome. Mm-hmm. You have Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, Jamon Davis. Like they've got a really good linebacker room. So that side of the defense is awesome. But looking at their secondary, it's still pretty mid. So I'm not too huge on the Commanders. They didn't get Brandon Aiyuk. They won't get Brandon Aiyuk. Somebody else is going to probably get him. So it's a building year.
Well, at least Aiyuk can tell the Niners what their all-22 tape had. So, that'll be good.
Oh, my God. Seriously.
But, no, yeah, I agree. Like, Jaden's going to be fine. And they brought in Cliff Kingsbury as the OC so they can run more of that air raid offense that Jaden's already used to. So it'll be interesting. And they're going to be frisky. They're going to annoy a few teams. They might upset, maybe the Eagles or something like that. And if they catch them in a trap game, like, who knows for sure. But, the emphasis this year is going to be keeping Jaden, out of harm's way and making sure he doesn't go into harm's way and stay, doesn't pull a Robert Griffin III. But I think he's going to be fine. Like, I think he has the weapons. So, and they bolstered their offensive line. And again, Austin Eckler, Luke McCaffrey, that's going to help. Scary Terry, Jahan Dotson. Like, yeah, they got a good little roster. So they're going to be in a spot to compete. And this will help Jaden a ton. So we'll see how they do.
Do we even really want to talk about the Giants? Like, they're going to be trash.
Yeah, so Daniel Jones, they're going to try and pretend that, he's going to be they paid him the money, so they got to see if he's going to work out. Obviously the hard knocks of Saquon. They got Brian Burns. Their defense looks okay, but I mean, not really. So I had them at 4-13. They're going to be bad. So we can say that.
Yeah, I think the defense is going to be the highlight of their team. Like, they will... Honestly, they could probably win them a game or two.
Yeah.
But the offense is going to be so weird and janky. And Danny Dimes is such a toss-up at this point. Like, if he's truly Danny Dimes of 2 years ago, this team could ball out randomly. I don't think they'll win the division, obviously, but they could probably get like 7 to 8 wins. That's balling out for their roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, but like that 22 team, like him, he was good because him and Barkley were cooking at the same time. And now you lose Saquon, and now it's who else do we have? Like Malik Neighbors is going to be awesome if he has a better quarterback throwing to him. So we'll see how that works out.
So moving on to the best division in football. No, it's probably not anymore, but it's my favorite division because it is home to the 49ers. So moving on to the NFC West.
All right.
My number one, I obviously I have a team up there. I don't know who you have though.
I will let you know as soon as we do the betting lines because you almost jumped the gun there, my friend.
I did. I got excited.
It's okay. The easy favorite is going to be the San Fran 49ers at -195. And then we got the LA Rams at +330, the Seahawks at +700, and then the Cardinals at +1300. So this is your division. We already know we already know the Niners are going to be flying high. So let's hear this abomination of a record.
It's audacious. All right. And I am so high on the 49ers, and I always am, always will be. This team's going to go 14-3. All right?
Same. I like this. Okay.
Look, the Niners fell short in the Super Bowl. They finished last year 12-5. This is the second Super Bowl that this core has lost together. And the first time around, the next year was plagued with injuries. There's an aspect to this that I view this 49ers team and I go, this core has gone through this loss before. That doesn't make it any easier. But what it does make easier is the next season, the season that you are trying to get back there. because you know what it's been like. You know how hard it's been. You know the battles you're going to have to go through. There's going to be disadvantages all season long. This team is going to have their back against the wall. But if there's a team that can actually pull off something like this, I believe it's the 49ers. That we lost some key players, but we brought in some good replacements. Potentially losing Brandon Aiyuk is obviously we're not going to get better. But if I'm looking at this team on offense, he was still probably the fourth option, third option at best. And I was really only wanting to keep Brandon Aiyuk for the future because I know that guys are getting older on this roster, right? And we've talked about what the future of this team could look like, should look like. My viewpoint was I always wanted Purdy and Aiyuk to be like the two-headed dragon that leads this team after this window is closed. And obviously that may not happen. But this season boils down to health. And I'm confident that we can get back to the same form that we were in last year. Debo has had an amazing camp. Juwan Jennings has had an awesome camp. Ricky Pearsall, Jordan Mason, Jair Brown, D. Winters, who's our new linebacker in place of Greenlaw while he's out. He's been having a great camp. He's flying all around the field. Diamador Lenore has been awesome for us. So there has been guys who have had phenomenal camps, and that's with this shadow of Brandon Aiyuk, looming around the facility and not playing, and everybody not knowing what the situation looks like. So guys are still showing up, playing hard. Debo's he's shown up to even the days where he could get off, like the veteran days. He's shown up to those days. So he's hungry. He's taking advantage of this true wide receiver one at this point.
How much of that, for Debo specifically, how much of that do you think is because he's in basically a contract year playing for his job? Like in the sense of, he might not be on this team next year if they're going to decide to trade him, because I don't know if you guys, sign him to a huge contract again, given what he's been through. But how much do you think it's because he's in a contract year he needs to go out and show himself?
A lot of it. I don't think that there's many players in this league who devote everything that they have, everything that they are to that team. They're devoting that to themselves because you're trying to get a bag, you're trying to get a paycheck, you're trying to get a Super Bowl, whatever the case, right? But it's for you. It's selfish, but it's true. Like you're on a team, but you are still you. And so for Debo Samuel, for him to show up to camp, all these, and put in all this work and play his absolute ass off all season long, it's going to be for him. It's going to benefit the 49ers. And that's all that we ever ask. All I ever ask is that a player plays as hard as he does and plays as well as he does. And if it takes a common denominator of him just trying to get a better contract or trying to get a better, look at the next step of his career, that's fine. I'm totally cool with that. Because if you play your heart out and you deserve a certain amount of money, go get it, whether it's with us or whoever.
That's fair. So let me ask you one last Debo question. Have there been, and I haven't been paying that close of attention to the Niners training camp, but have there been, with the new kick return system, has there been Debo returning in practices?
From what I understand, he's played a little bit of it. He's been asking more than he's actually been thrown into it.
Okay.
But I think it's more just to avoid any, potential injury early on. Because, we only have one true wide receiver one at the moment. But honestly, when it comes to the season, I think Debo is going to be the kick returner.
Okay.
I know that Ricky Pearsall has been tried at it as well, and he's actually taken the majority of the kick returns, if I remember correct or recall correctly. At least midway through camp, that was the case. So if that stayed true, then I wouldn't be surprised if Ricky takes it just to kind of get him out on the field a little bit more and get some experience, with the ball in his hand.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Jude, when it comes to the season, give me Debo returning those kicks all day long, because I guarantee you he's housing at least one of those this season if he does it all season long.
No, that's great. So before I even go, I have more questions I want to ask, because I want to dissect what's happening around this Niners team. So let's talk about the whole Brandon Aiyuk situation. You and I, have been talking about it all off season. Have been following up with the drama of it all. We don't have to rehash every detail, but we can discuss. We can discuss right now. There's been, talks of the trade and potentially, him having options between the Patriots, the Browns, the Steelers, and then him rebuffing the Patriots' $28.5 million reported offer, and apparently not wanting to go to Cleveland. What do you make of this? And I want to ask a more specific, like, what are the odds as of today in your mind that he is a Niner next year? What percent do you think that he'll be a Niner to start the season?
I think it's 20% and below that he's a 49er, honestly.
Wow, okay.
I think that it's gotten to a point where both parties, Brandon Aiyuk and the organization, the 49ers organization, are ready to just kind of put this behind. And it's not the kind of situation where, they're ready to put it behind, so we're going to budge or he's going to budge. It's not like that. Both parties are very stuck on a number. And that's been the case for months now. The Niners are somewhat limited in what they can offer. Not currently, like they had all the cap space in the world to make this work, but it's looking at the future. It's looking at what you have to pay Brock Purdy next year. And obviously that doesn't really start next year. Typically a quarterback contract looks more aggressive 2 years after. That's when the real hit starts, because you tend to, backfill those contracts. But it's low, that it's a low percentage that Brandon comes back here, because there's been so much soured milk now. There's muddied waters. It's a weird situation, and it's been handled poorly from every party from the start. And it's been one of the weirdest handled contract negotiations I've ever seen unfold, like from top to bottom. And I think that it's a lack of integrity from a lot of standpoints. And it really got us to this point. It's different than the Nick Bosa situation where, Nick was holding out, but all along, everybody knew that the 49ers were going to pay Nick Bosa, because without Nick Bosa, your defense is nothing. And so eventually it got to the point, I know it was a week before, it was almost days, I think it was in the last week before week 1 that he signed that contract. He inked it. Then looking at the Debo situation, he requested a trade, but he wasn't hopping all over social medias and hopping on podcasts and calling out his team and, leaking film of training camps from other teams. Like, that kind of thing wasn't happening. Debo just went completely dark, and he let his agent do a lot of that work. And then Debo requested that trade to try and get leverage. And because he had been so quiet and stayed just relatively under the radar, the Niners, they lost the leverage at that point, and Debo actually got that leverage. And so he ended up getting the money that he wanted out of it. And so I think that that's looking at the previous negotiations and contracts and stuff that I've seen go down specifically with the Niners. I look at this Brandon Aiyuk one, and I'm just like, it's not just the 49ers side that handled this poorly. Yes, you could have paid him as early as possible, before Jeddah's inked, before Amon-Ra St. Brown inked, and you would never have this issue, but you didn't. So that's one. But then looking at Brandon and what he's done this whole time, it's like, what are you doing? Like, you're not making the 49ers want to give you more money. Like, in all honesty, all you're really showing is like, well, what if we were to offer a boatload of money to this guy? How can we trust that if we go through a losing season or situation, that he's not going to be a hothead who's going to, be an issue in the locker room? We don't know that, because he hasn't been a part of that losing team early. So it's going to be, it's interesting, man. I think it's a low percentage that he comes back, but I will say this too. I personally want Brandon Aiyuk back. I just want this whole thing to stop. Like, I'm tired of refreshing my Twitter feed. I'm tired of keeping up with this whole freaking saga. Like, it's been all off season long. And as teams with lots of stars up and down, not just stars, but like all pro level stars, these kind of negotiations happen. And that's why every season it seems like there's a new one for the 49ers. It's not just because the Niners are a bad organization that don't know how to handle money. No, it's because there's so much money to be thrown around at all these different guys that you have to take so much time to figure out the monies in it all. Like, how does it come down the road? How does this affect who we got to pay later? Like, this is that window that we've talked about for a while now. And the window is really boiled down to like 2 years into Brock's contract. And honestly, like, it starts next year, because they will pay Brock Purdy. I think
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how this year goes, Brock has shown he can lead this offense, and he's shown he can lead this team. I think that Brock and Trent right now are the biggest names that you've got to hold on to as the 49ers, and that's why they're so stuck on the number for Brandon.
And again, when we look at the number for Brandon, and we've talked about this again in nauseum, just like potential options, 28.5 puts him in a top 5 receiver conversation. In an offense where he isn't the number one option, but when you talk about it, it clearly wasn't all about the money, because if you're declining $28.5 million from New England, what are you really trying to prove? And you're going to a bad situation, but you're going to clearly be the number one receiver. If that's really what you were wanting, then he probably would have taken that deal, or even the Cleveland too. It's the same kind of thing. But you're on this team that you've spent so much of your time on, you've grown so much in. This is a legitimately, this is as championship contender as you can get in the entire NFL. They have the best shot outside of the Kansas City. And he's a huge part of that, and his numbers reflect that. But he believes he wants to get paid like a number one receiver, and the Niners like, we're trying to pay you as close as we can to a number one receiver without putting us in this situation. And neither side wants to help each other, because the Niners are just calling his bluff publicly, and it's just you're right, it's got messy. And this isn't, and I've alluded to this a couple times. This isn't the kind of energy you want off of a Super Bowl loss, a heartbreaking one at that, where you were also one play away from, potentially beating Mahomes, and, having all this is a different conversation. And now Trent Williams is legitimately holding out, because Brandon Aiyuk can hold out and not have to, deal with any fines because he's on a rookie deal. But Trent Williams is taking fines every day that he's missing camp, and he doesn't care, because he did this in Washington too.
Yep.
And he is more important, unfortunately. Without that left side protection, you don't have a replacement for that. And that's just something that, when it comes to the Niners, it's not just the whole BA situation. I hear there's injuries going around the camp too that you don't want going on. But on top of that, last year they fought through one of the hardest kind of schedules in terms of, I complained about my Eagles rest disadvantage. The Niners had it worse. The Niners had the worst rest disadvantage last year. They said, I found this article from Warren Sharp, and he's an analytics guy, and he's been doing this analytics nonsense for the NFL for about 30 years now. And he does research into the scheduling, because over the past few years, we've really kind of seen the way that the scheduling has been going on, with shorter weeks, more primetime games, teams getting way less rest than the other teams. He had a bunch of stats. And the Niners play 8 out of their freaking 17 games with a rest disadvantage. And not only do they do that, no other team in the NFL has more than 6 that they have to deal with. The Niners also are tied with the Bengals for the most short games, short rest games. So most Thursday night, coming off of a Monday to Sunday, or a, Sunday to Thursday type thing. They're tied with the Bengals for the most in that. And so when we think about the rest of it all, the Niners had to go through that last year, and they had a minus 20 day advantage. So they had 20 less days throughout the whole season compared to their opponents. This year it's 21. It's 21 days less, and it's hard for me to fathom that they're going to be able. They hardly survived last year, but they also made it to the Super Bowl. This is a talented enough team to make the Super Bowl, right? But those rest disadvantage games, the Niners played 4 last year that they played a team coming off the bye, and they were 3-1, or they were 1-3. Sorry, because they lost the Seahawks. No, they won the Seahawks, but they lost to Minnesota. That was off them coming off a bye. They lost to Cleveland. That was them coming off of a bye, and there was another one in there that I'm forgetting. And the same thing happened to the Chiefs. The Chiefs also had to deal with the rest disadvantage, and they struggled in those games that they had rest disadvantages. But when it came to the playoffs, both teams made it to the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying it can't be overcome, but given what this roster has gone through, especially last year, to ask them to take an ass whooping rest wise again this season, to expect them to come out of this healthy, and to not have to, I just don't, with all the vibes around this team, I'm just nervous that like I can't help but notice like an Eagles level collapse just like waiting in the wings, because I can see this team starting off super strong, and then you run into your own little gauntlet towards the end of the year where you're playing teams off of their buys and you're tired and you're going to go up against tough opponents, and that's going to wear you down, and that makes me nervous for the health of this team. So that's just something that scares me a little bit. And for me, I still have them winning the division. I had them at 13-4, but I'm going to dumb them down to 12-5 because that's what they finished last year, and they were still, first in the NFC. Like, that's great. I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about, like, the talent is all there. That's never been a question. And I believe that Brock's going to, capitalize on another great season. But like, I'm really, really nervous about their health and their rest and their mental by the time week 10, 11 starts rolling around. So we'll see, but I still have them as, second in the NFC, and they're going to, they're still going to be just fine in my opinion.
Yeah. So I'm worried about the health for sure. I'm worried about the rest advantage. I'm not worried about the mental, because I've already said it, like, the core of this team has gone through a Super Bowl loss already together. Going into this season, they've gone through this before, is kind of what I'm getting at. And like, that's shitty. Like, the fact that they've had to endure that, and now they're going through it again. And it doesn't make it any easier. But what it does mean is that, like, these guys will understand how to shake the mindset coming out of last year and go into this year, like, ready to go. And I know that this cloud of Brandon Aiyuk is looming over everything, but honestly, I don't see it affecting this team, because all this team needs to see is a win. Like, they get a win under their belt in week 1 against the Jets, and this team is going to be back to their normal form. So yes, health is going to be a major factor all season long. I can say that for all 30 teams. Like,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And the as far as like the rest advantage is concerned, like, all it does is really give them at least give fans an excuse of why we lost each game. So I appreciate that, actually. Like, now I can go into every single loss that the 49ers have this year and just say, oh no, there's a rest advantage.
Yeah, that's
it. But no, like, as far as a rest advantage is concerned, there are so many players on the 49ers who have that next man up mentality. And they are, like, when you look at them on paper, you're like, they're deep in certain areas, but they're not so deep in others. And that's 100% true. But what I do know is that Kyle Shanahan isn't going to bring an MFer onto this roster if he's not a dog who's ready for his next step. Yeah. Like, he could be the worst guy on this roster, the freaking backup punter or whatever you want, right? Like, he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready for his moment when it comes. Because knowing the 49ers, they've battled injuries for years and years and years now, like, at terrible times in the seasons. But what has shown, especially last year, like, is that next man up mentality keeps them going. It keeps them driving, and it keeps them, like, in a competitive state. Like, we lost Debo and Trent last year, and both of those games we should have won. It came down to a kick, right? Both times. Like it's just, I totally feel where you're coming from, and there's a large part of me that agrees with you and sees like that this season could be a disaster. Yeah. But like, especially like as a fan right now, I have to go into this year with the belief, the strong belief that this team is not going to fall under that same cloud of Super Bowl loss. You know, like it's just not going to happen. I have to believe that this team is going to be ready to go going into this season, and they're going to march right back into the playoffs, and they're going to have to make their same noise that they were last year.
God, you sound just like me, dude. This is exactly how I feel.
Let's hope the team isn't the same as the Eagles last year.
Yeah, and it's tough. And it's not just that. And again, back to like that schedule thing, the rest disadvantage has become more prevalent in the past few years. Just with the way they're adjusting the schedule to try and get more primetime games, to try to get more. Yeah. There's a total of 272 games that go on throughout the course of an NFL regular season. And this year there will be 101 of those games where one team is facing a rest disadvantage. And that's 37%. That's the most in NFL history that's been a thing. And you got teams like the Niners who are playing 7+ games at a rest disadvantage or more. And it's something that the numbers will, maybe in the next few years when we start seeing these kind of extremes, might actually play a role. And then you're going to get people complaining and saying, oh, hey, maybe this rest thing needs to be looked at if guys get hurt, stuff like that. But people, and that was one of the things they interviewed one of the schedule makers, and he said the important thing about this was that if fans don't complain and if owners and GMs don't complain, then we're looking good, because they normally don't notice. They notice the teams that they play when they release the schedules, but they don't come out with the dates right away. And that's the part that the teams don't pay attention to. And it's been confirmed that NFL GMs and coaches, sometimes they don't really pay attention to that. They just focus on what's in front of them. So it's one thing that if the numbers start backing it up, it'll be interesting to see. So if the Niners struggle, I'm going to say pre-excuses, but it's one of those things that that's something to look into that makes the schedule release much more interesting and important down the line. So that's just something that I noticed that I thought was interesting. So
yeah, it's an interesting little note for sure. We'll have to keep tabs on that.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish up. Obviously, we have the Niners dominating this division. Who do you have for the rest of the division? Who's your 2, 3, 4?
So 2 is going to be the Rams, and I'm looking at this team. I have them going 11-6.
Whoa! No way. Okay.
I'm pretty high on this team. First of all, the Rams are never bad. Under Sean McVay, they're never bad.
Mm-hmm.
This team is really talented. Last year they finished 10-7. They brought back pretty much the same team. This time they don't have key injuries. And they added Jimmy freaking G, dude. They're going to be amazing. Oh, by the way, Jimmy G has had a terrible camp as usual. They've got Puka Nacua, who is awesome. They've got Cooper Kupp now, who's going to be, barring injury, knock on wood, he's going to be there the entire season. Those two get to run on the same field together. That's terrifying. And then they still got Tutu Atwell. That receiving core is disgusting. And to think that Matt Stafford, who is just pretty much all reliable at this point, as long as he's healthy and slinging that thing, dude, this team is going to easily move the ball. Yeah. The defense will be solid. They added Tre'Davious White, which is a really great pickup for their secondary. Mm-hmm. I think the ceiling is a bit hard to see, but the floor for them is raised for sure. And that's kind of why I have them going 11-6. That's kind of what I would say. I want to say their floor is probably 10 wins. And if I had to put a ceiling on it, I'm going to say it's 13 wins. I think this team is going to be damn good. And they'll give the Niners a run for their money.
I like that. So I don't have them that far. I'll tell you in a second. But the Rams, for me, I'm nervous. Offensively, I'm not nervous. That offense is going to cook. Puka did go down with a slight knee injury. They said it's not too serious, but he'll be ready for week 1, which is all that matters. But man, I don't know. I don't know what this defense is going to look like without the greatest defensive player of his generation on there. Aaron Donald was the game plan for most offenses. When you're game planning around that, you're operating a little different. And I wonder, just that they have good pieces. I'm not saying that this defense is going to be terrible, but I don't know how good they're really going to be. I have the Rams. I also think it's part of the exercise of it all. They were one of my casualties. I had them at 7-10, but they're a popular playoff pick. So I agree that their ceiling could be high if everything's clicking. Matt stays healthy. Matt Stafford never stays healthy. He just plays hurt all the time. This dude's just getting decked and still staying out there and still plays hurt because he doesn't care, because he's a baller, and I love it. I respect Matt Stafford so much, dude. Yeah. That dude's always playing hurt.
Yeah.
So the big question is going to be the defense. Will they be able to produce without their greatest player ever? So that'll be something that, that can't be ignored. But I also don't think they're going to be as bad as my record suggests that they're going to be 7-10. They're third in the division, by the way, for me. But yeah, no, I don't disagree. But I'm also for me, it's almost like people bought into the hype because they almost beat the Lions. And I'm like, listen, I get it. That team looked great, but now there's some fluctuation there that might affect them going down the line. So we'll see.
Yeah, I have this feeling that their offense, honestly, when I look at the Sean McVay era, I think this is the best offense he's ever had.
Yeah, I could
Um,
see that.
and for that reason, like I look at the Aaron Donald loss, and I'm like, you can lose a guy like that with the kind of offense that you have. I know Aaron Donald is one of the best defensive players of all time,
Mm-hmm.
but um, looking at what this offense can do, like they're going to do some damage. They could be averaging like 38 points a game if they're fully healthy and fully like clicking.
I could see that for sure.
And honestly, if they're averaging 30 points a game, I don't think there's many other teams who can average 30 points a game and keep up with that offense. Like it's going to come down to the health. It's going to come down to if they're clicking. But dude, their offense is going to be one of the nastiest in the league, I think.
Yeah, that's the main reason for their ceiling is probably because they'll be able to go in shootouts with most of these teams. So it'll definitely be interesting, and they have to stay healthy just like every other team, right? But if Cooper and Puka are out there for a whole season, man, that's gonna be nasty. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see for sure. Okay, so I'm curious to see who you have as your third.
So third is actually the Seahawks.
Okay. I wasn't sure where you were going with this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool,
and so last year they finished 9-8 last year, and I think they're going to finish 9-8 again this year.
Same. Okay. Perfect.
They overhauled the coaching staff like entirely. They're so head coach Mike Macdonald is D coordinator from Baltimore, and I think that was a really great hire for them. Honestly, they brought in some key players for defense. Geno's QB, but I can see Sam Howell getting some playtime too. I think that they're both pretty similar in terms of overall skill level. I don't believe in Geno as much as people like want to.
That's fair.
I totally think fair. That where I'm mainly concerned with him is like he has to have a really clean pocket to operate in. And he doesn't do well outside of that pocket. And with that O-line, when I look at the O-line, I'm pretty nervous for what's going to happen to Geno, not what Geno's going to do to the rest of the game. So it really, I'm looking at the roster, and it's pretty solid. Like Njigba's role is rumored to be larger this year, and that could be a really nice wide receiver 2 option for him. With DK, obviously, is wide receiver 1, which, by the way, little side note, DK Metcalf decided today that punching one of his teammates was a good idea in training camp. So that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even mention the Lions-Giants fights, too.
Forgot about that. Yeah, and those were pretty fun to watch, too. But no, look, the Seahawks, they have a solid roster. It boils down to execution, and I just don't believe in Geno. I really think that if they rolled out Sam all season long, they'd probably have 1 or 2 more wins.
Okay, that's a fair take. Listen, like, I'm not on the same train as everyone else either. Like, I think Geno is a fine quarterback. I think at his best, he's a top 15 guy when he's peaking, when he's playing at his absolute best.
Peaking, yeah.
When he's playing at his best. So I have this team going 9-8. They have pieces. I like Devon Witherspoon. Their skill position players, totally fine. Their offensive line, garbage. Their defensive line, solid. And Mike Macdonald's going to implement his defensive system. It'll be very interesting to see how they approach the Niners, but they have nowhere near the level of skill that he had in Baltimore. So it'll be interesting. And it'll be, I like the hire for him. They go from Pete Carroll to Mike Macdonald. That's a great, almost seamless kind of fit for style that they want. I like all of that. But they're also such a work in progress team. They also kind of need to kick the tires and kind of start a rebuild and get a new QB in the building, get a young guy. Like Sam Howell is a young guy, but he's not the guy. So I do think that maybe, a few knockout punches from some of these other teams in their division, and they might be able to get that rebuild going in a way that, they probably need. They're going to be competitive. It's a hard place to play. They still carry that. They're still gritty. They have players who are dogs, but that'll only help them so much. But I think they're going to be competitive. They're going to cause problems. I still think they'll be 9-8. They're going to win a few games that they shouldn't, because Geno's going to play awesome, or their defense steps up in a huge way. So I have them as second in the division because I have the Rams at 7-10 at third. So yeah. So that's how.
What was your record for the Seahawks? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. 9-8 as well. Yeah, because you just had the Rams so high. You had the Rams way higher than I did, so they just swapped. I just have the Niners running away with the division. I don't think the Rams are going to compete as much as you do in that sense.
I will say too, like I really hope that you're right on the Rams because I don't want to have to like be that good to win the division. If we can just get to the playoffs, I'll be thrilled. So, and then we get to rest guys towards the end of the season. But look, moving on to the end of it, the Arizona Cardinals last year, they finished 4-13, just a beautiful record last year.
Still beat the Eagles.
It was just a disaster of a season. Yeah, they still beat the Eagles when it mattered. Thanks for that 1 seed, Arizona.
Yeah, seriously.
And they had disconnects, they had injuries. It was kind of a mess. But this year, it's going to be interesting for them. They do look frisky. The roster has some building blocks now. I still have mixed feelings on Kyler Murray. I'm not sure that he can be like a star quarterback or the star quarterback that could lead this team to another, division title like he did. I think that year was honestly fluky. He had a really good system around him, similar to like a guy like Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
But they have a really good running back tandem of James Conner and Trey Benson. And obviously, let's not forget who they freaking drafted and probably the best ready to go, ready professional wide receiver that we've seen in a number of years in Marvin Harris.
Yeah.
Their tight end in Trey McBride, he's awesome. He's had glimpses of top tier talent. Like they've got a frisky team. Defensively, they'll be okay. It probably won't cost them a whole lot of games, but they're definitely not going to win any games off defense. Like it's going to boil down to how good are they on offense and how early do they click.
Yeah, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is just going to be awesome. He's their best receiver since DeAndre Hopkins, almost by a long shot, given what Kyler's had to deal with. We always have to worry about this guy because the new Call of Duty comes out in November, so we'll see what happens with him there. That I don't think that'll ever escape him. But no, there seems to be a good energy with this team. They're aware of where they're at, and they know that they just got to focus on getting better. And Jonathan Gannon's a good coach for them. As much as I crapped on him, they took us to school. So, in a very Eagles-like fashion. So I think, there's a recipe for this team to be good. And it'll just be a matter of, like you said, will they click early? Because if they do, they'll be friskier. I have them being semi-frisky. I have them at 7-10 as well. So I think they'll improve. 3-win improvement doesn't seem that crazy to me. But obviously they still have some work to do. So
yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's close this out with our NFC playoff seeding based off of our records. So would you like to go first and go down 1 through 7?
Yes, I can do that. Let me pull it up here. So at number 1, I have the San Francisco 49ers. Then I've got the Lions, the Eagles, both with the same record, by the way.
Okay, so the Lions finish at 2.
The Falcons. Okay. Yeah. The Falcons, then the Cowboys, the Rams, and the Packers squeaking in at 7.
Okay. So then for me, obviously, and first I have the Eagles, and then I have San Francisco, and then Green Bay, and then Atlanta, the Cowboys, the Lions, and the Seahawks.
Okay.
So that's what I have. The Seahawks barely making the playoffs at 9-8, but that's also because I had those other teams so the Buccaneers could totally be in there. The Rams could totally be in there. But based off this exercise, the Seahawks ended up squeaking in I guess when I did this, I had the Seahawks going in there. So, we'll see. But I reserve the right to have those other, honorable mentions, but still, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I was when I was doing all these rankings and going through the season for each team, like I found at times I went into the season and I would the first one that I simulated through and I ran through all the games, I had the Bucks winning 11 games and I was like, hold on. And I looked at I did a deeper dive into them, listened to a few podcasts on them and a few videos and stuff. And I was like, okay, that I'm tripping a little bit. And I kind of brought it back to earth and and I did that with a few teams, but there's going to be some teams this year that are complete wild cards, and I mean that's the case for every NFL season. One of the wild cards is one of the Super Bowl favorites right now, so it's like we're going into the season, and the point of this exercise was to give like just our best input as to what we think, teams are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, you have the freaking Seahawks making the playoffs, and I have them missing versus the Rams going 11-6, and you have them the total opposite.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to see that side of things because it makes me think. But this is gonna be a fun season, dude. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I think another thing with this exercise that we're not going to really get better at until next year is when we figure out how this kind of whole kickoff rule really does affect the game. Like, does
Yeah.
does the kickoff rule, make it an extra 5-point, average for certain teams? Like, what big of a difference does that make? How do teams actually strategize? What kind of an impact does that have? And if one team really dominates on special teams, then that's something that we have to consider when we do this moving forward. And that's why with the Cowboys, I was like, they have the best return man right now currently. And I'm like, I'm really excited to see just kind of if that makes some noise, this season too. So
I was watching the Pat McAfee show actually, and they were talking about the new kickoff, and one of the things that they brought up that I was kind of thinking about was, and I don't fully understand it. I'm going to try to explain it right. Essentially, like if the ball is kicked, they can't move until it is in the returner's chest, but there's no evident point as to when they can actually go, because like they talked about doing a whistle where it's like you have to listen for the whistle and the ref has to blow it, but then it's like that goes against the traditions of football. Like you don't want the plays to start and end a play, or, for the whistle. So it's interesting to see how that's going to work out, and I think we're going to get a better idea through like preseason week 3. We'll start to see some things kind of happen. We'll see some mishaps. We'll see some things go really well, but it's going to be a trial year, and I have no idea how it's going to go. And I don't know how I feel if it's going to be the reason why certain teams win, 2 to 3 games versus not winning those games. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
like, because then it's like, yeah, special teams is absolutely an important aspect to your team, but it shouldn't be the reason that you win 3 games. You know what I mean? Like it should be the reason you win maybe 1 or 2. And it should be because your quarterback drives you down the field for a last second kick.
I could see that. No, and that's fair. And I think, when I the reason I was so excited about the kickoff change was because I was so used to the kickoff being an important piece. I watched Devin Hester in his prime, and he was just dicing dudes up, and it was a really fun play. And that was part of the reason that year that the Bears made that Super Bowl, was because he was attributing 1 or 2 touchdowns every other game to it, and that's game changing. So it'll be interesting for me. And again, there's a lot of technicalities that need to be understood. People need to sacrifice. Some teams might just sacrifice and just kick the ball back for a touchback and just take the extra 5 yards, so you're at the 30. Like, it might get to a point where some teams just opt to not, deal with that.
So I think we're going to see that more than anything, to be honest with you. I think we'll see a lot of touchbacks. Yeah.
Yeah. It's to, discourage, but I don't think it's enough of a punishment for teams to be like, no, what's 5 yards? So we'll see. It'll be interesting for sure. All right.
Definitely.
Do you have any final thoughts before we head out here?
Please God, give us happy health, and let's get this Brandon Aiyuk thing done. Honestly, I'm ready to put that behind us.
Need to just focus on football at this point, right? So I guess we'll see 100%. What happens.
We'll see.
All right, y'all. This was episode 52 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com or any of our social medias that we have up here. For those watching on YouTube, for all of you audio listeners, you can hit us up on any of our social medias. We have each of the links for each down in the description below. So please feel free to like, rate, review the show. And for you on YouTube, like, subscribe, follow, tell your friends about us. Help grow this channel. We're slowly growing. We're noticing the little growth that we have here, and we appreciate all the love and support that we've received. And we love everyone's comments. We're starting to see more now on some of our horrible takes, and we love it. So this is we're super excited for the season to come, and we're ready. We got some stuff planned for you guys, so we're excited. So as usual, I'm Marcos Conan-Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
We will see y'all next week. Peace.